Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Frank Santopadre. You know, years ago, when I started out in stand-up, I used to play the Improv in New York, and one of the people I would run into at the club was the late, well, supposedly late anyway, Andy Kaufman. Frank and I phoned up Andy's old partner in crime, Bob Zmuda, to get the lowdown on Andy's fascinating life and possible death. Enjoy. Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Frank Santopadre. And our guest today is a writer, actor, author, and producer who has created and produced comedy specials for NBC and HBO. He's the co-founder and co-creator of Comic Relief, a charity that's raised over $80 million to help combat homelessness. And he was the wingman, comedy partner, and co-conspirator of the legendary Andy Kaufman, and probably the person who knew him best. His new book is called Andy Kaufman, The Truth Finally. Welcome to the show, Bob Zmuda.
Thank you, Gilbert. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Bob.
Also, thank you. You did one of our comic reliefs for us many years ago with I think Richard Belzer.
Yes, yeah, we were Dick and Stinky.
Yeah, you were the ventriloquist dummy.
Yes.
I don't remember Dick and Stinky. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. It was. I remember it being. Oh, go ahead, Bob. Were you?
You said, I recall, it was just like a ventriloquist act. Belzer came out, he was the ventriloquist, and you sat on his lap, and they drew the lines coming down from the either side of your chin. And Gilbert looked so, I got to tell you, he looked so much like a ventriloquist dummy. They kind of had that red makeup on you. You had a little bow tie, you know. It was so great. People said, you know, Belzer and Gilbert should go on the road doing this. This is fucking hysterical, you know?
Yeah, because it started out by me and Richard, just like we used to joke around.
Right.
As Dick and Stinky. And it was a lot more obscene.
Right, because this was on ABC, right?
Yeah, so it was a little harder, because he would go, hey there, Stinky. And go fuck yourself. Why don't you suck my dick?
It's a little like Otto and George.
Yes.
and this was the early years at Bud Freeman's Improv and Rick Newman's Catch a Rising Star, right?
Oh, yes.
You started what year, 74?
No. When I first started doing comedy, I think it was like the end of I was 15.
Holy shit.
Yes.
15.
And I think it was may have been 69 or something.
Oh, wow. So you were there, because I got there with Albrecht, Chris Albrecht. Him and I had a comedy team act, and I came in there around 74 at the Improv. So that's right, you were already doing it.
Yeah.
Now tell us a little bit about Albrecht and Zmuda, Bob, comedy from A to Z, for people who don't know.
I Chris, and you know Chris, and Chris, big honcho now. And Chris was just another actor. I went to Carnegie Mellon University. Chris went to Hofstra. We met in summer stock. We did some summer stock, and after that summer, it was about 1973 or 72. We decided that we wanted to become stars. So we should either go to Hollywood or New York City. Yeah. So we went to New York City, and we roomed together and just starved. Had a great time because, Gilbert, back then, who cared? It was a lot of fun,
Yeah.
And nobody really thought that anybody's career would really hit. Everybody was doing it because I guess none of us could think of any other jobs to have, I would imagine,
That was basically it. It was
And when I started, I walked in the Improv with him, and it was, and talk about cheese, walking in the right place at the right time. It was Richard Belzer, it was you, it was Richard Lewis, Elaine Boozler, Larry David, Jay Leno, Andy Kaufman, and what happened with Albrecht is that Bud Freeman, who owned the club, was going through a nasty divorce with his wife Silver. And he was going to open a club on the West Coast, and he thought, because Silver, as you know, Gilbert, she liked to give notes to the comics.
Oh,
and
yes.
They didn't like that shit. They didn't like that at all, you know. Nice lady, but they didn't like it. So Bud figured, oh my God, if this keeps on, they're going to desert the Improv, and he'll never be able to get them to come to the West Coast. So he took Chris Albrecht, because Chris was probably back then doing a lot of coke with these guys, and he made Chris the night manager of the Improv. Now, what's extraordinary about that? So then, all of a sudden, when the comedy boom started taking off, and what happened is that the agents in New York, in L.A., said, "Hey, this comedy thing is taking off." You know, Freddie Prinze, Jimmy Walker, Gabe Kaplan, everybody was getting their own TV show. So they said, "Hey, we got to find out who these young comics are and sign them up." And everybody says, we don't know who they are. Who would know? Well, who would know better than Chris Albrecht, who's managing the Improv? So they tap Chris on, ICM comes and taps Chris on the shoulder and says, "How would you like to be an agent?" Chris is a nightclub owner, and at the Improv. He says, sure. He comes to the West Coast, and within 6 months, Chris becomes one of the super agents in Hollywood, because he signs up Whoopi, he signs up, I think, Chris Rock, Billy Crystal, because all these dudes knew him. And then, maybe a year after that, you remember the names, Gilbert, Bridget Potter, and over at HBO, and she decided that they needed to rebrand HBO. Before Albrecht got there, it was just the boxing with Don King. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That's what HBO was all about.
I remember when HBO was like 70% of it. It was a weird kind of great station to jerk off to.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had it was called like something like isometrics or flexibility, or they had these clips. It was like almost 24 hours of girls in spandex doing
exercising.
Yes.
Aerobicize.
Aerobicize. Yeah. And that was the big thing back then. And the camera would follow them, and it would, narrow in on their asses and crotches and tits. And that was 90% of HBO.
Yeah.
And boxing.
Yes.
And then they brought Don King in, and then they brought Albrecht, and they branded it comedy. And then within 6 months of having that job, he called me up, his ex-comedy team partner, and he said, him and I had a comedy team at the Improv, and he said, "Zmuda, you have any ideas?" He says, I'm now a programmer. I'm not even sure what the fuck programming is.
And so that was the official end of Albrecht and Zmuda. When Chris...
Yeah. Well, it kind of ended at the Improv. He started chasing the girls, and I started writing for Andy Kaufman. When Andy got the gig on SNL, then I started writing for Andy. So I was covered, he was covered, But the good thing is that Chris then, so when Chris got that job, Live Aid, with Bob Geldof's Live Aid, where the music community got together and totally changed their image. Before Live Aid, musicians were guys that had too much pussy, smashed up hotel rooms, took too many drugs, and it totally changed the image of what the music industry could do when they raised all that money, to help the starving in Africa. So Chris had just gotten the job. I'm watching Live Aid, and I said, shit. I said, Chris, I called him up. I said, Chris, you and I know everybody in the comedy business, because, Gilbert, as you know, it's just like everybody from the Improv and Catch at the time. That's it, And everybody was coming up the ladder. And I said, look, we know all these guys. We could do the Live Aid of comedy. and we called it Comic Relief. The dear Robin Williams was a good friend of mine, so I got him aboard. And then Chris got Billy Crystal aboard through David Steinberg. And then Whoopi was brand new. She had just done The Color Purple. She didn't even know she was a star yet. And I think Chris got to her, and she was excited that she could meet Billy Crystal and Robin Williams. And that's how Comic Relief was born. We thought we were going to do it one time, and it went on 28 years, and we raised, like you said, over $80 million.
It's an achievement, Bob. You deserve a lot of credit.
Well, thanks to Robin, Whoopi, Billy, and Chris Albrecht, and all the other comedians like Gilbert, and Richard Belzer, and as you know, every comedian out there, it's almost like you weren't in comedy unless you did a Comic Relief.
Now, tell us how Chris Albrecht got fired from HBO.
Oh, God, Gilbert. You're bad.
He's incorrigible.
Maybe you should ask Tony Clifton about that.
Bob, before we jump...
I think Tony was dating the girl before Chris was.
Okay, now we were talking, Frank and I, about in the book, and we heard that you once showed up at the Playboy Mansion in your Tony Clifton outfit.
Yeah.
And you and all the girls thought it was Andy Kaufman.
No,
they thought it was Jim Carrey.
They thought it was Jim Carrey.
They thought it was Jim Carrey.
Right. Yeah,
okay, so these. Go ahead.
Here's what happened. We were. I produced. Me and Danny DeVito produced the film Man on the Moon, which was the Andy Kaufman story that starred Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman. Paul Giamatti plays yours truly. Courtney Love played Lynn Margulies, Andy's girlfriend, a good friend of mine. But she's the co-author of the book you have right there, too, Lynn. So anyway, Jim was never into Playboy much, and he gets a call. Hefner had been married, happily married for years. He had kids. He wasn't messing around with the Playmates or anything. This was years ago. And his wife had it. She just didn't like living in the fishbowl anymore. And she asked for a divorce from Hef. Hef was crushed. The Playboy company was happy because they wanted Hefner to go back with the pipe and the silk pajamas and start putting on the lifestyle of an older person who could have all these hot chicks, that sells the magazine and everything. So he came back, once she left him, he put together this thing. It was one of these summer sleep parties at his night. I forgot what it was called.
Oh, Midsummer Night.
Yes. Yeah. Did you go to that?
I only went to one party in the history of Playboy.
Yeah, well, Jim went. Jim went, and Jim thought it was an old '60s, '70s thing. He could give a shit about Hefner, but he gets this call right when we're doing the movie. I'm a Chicago boy, where as you know, of course, Playboy started.
Sure.
So I went, well, this is cool. He says, no, this is lame. He says he doesn't want to go. But believe me, guys, Jim doesn't need to be going to hang around any. He's got so much pussy thrown at him. It's ridiculous. Seriously, it's ridiculous. When we were making the movie,
certainly then, yeah.
I mean, moms like with 15-year-old daughters made up like little tramps. Oh, Jim, maybe you could give it an audition. They didn't care if he dicked her. Of course, he stayed away from all that. But anyway, so he gets a call from Hefner himself. And Hefner wants Jim, because Jim is the biggest star in America at the time, $20 million a movie. And he says, Jim, I'd like to invite you, to come to my thing. And Jim thinks about it, and he really doesn't want to go. And I said, Jim, you got to go to this. This is too cool, man. He said, okay. And he said, oh, I got an idea. He says, I'll go as Tony Clifton. Because he, in the movie Man on the Moon, he also plays the Tony Clifton role, which is Andy Kaufman's lounge lizard character. So he calls Hefner back. He said he's going to go, but he says, Mr. Hefner, he says, I'll come, but I'm going to come in character because I'm shooting a movie now. I'm coming as this Tony Clifton character, Andy Kaufman's alter ego, and I'm going to come in full makeup, but you got to promise me you cannot tell anyone it's me, or it's not going to be any fun for me. There's no sense of me doing it then. It'll be like I'm some guy in a stupid Halloween costume. And Hef, of course, promises him because he wants Jim there. Well, so we go to Jim. So, a week later, Jim's in the makeup chair at his house, and they're putting the prosthetic pieces on his face, jowls, nose, chin, the whole deal, wig, to make him look like Clifton. And I check my messages at home. Bill Zamy, Gilbert?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Bill the writer, and Bill, had written a book about Hefner. He was good friends with Hef. So there's a message on my machine at home. And this is 10 minutes before Jim's going to walk out of the house as Tony Clifton and go to this fucking party. And it's from Zamy. And he says, Zmuda, hey, I hear, he says, Hefner tells me that Jim's showing up as Clifton. Well, when I told Jim this, he got so fuck Hefner, that son of a bitch. He said, I'm not going now. And he starts ripping off the makeup. He's really pissed. And he said, oh, this is a downer. And he says, I told him not to tell. He said, I'm not going there. He said, how stupid is that? And then he went, wait a second. Okay, I'm going to fuck Hefner over. He says, Hefner thinks I'm coming as Tony Clifton, meaning Jim Carrey. And I said, yeah. He said, Zmuda, you do it. I said, no. He said, come on. And it's been years since I got in the prosthetics. And I said, no, you got to do this. So they send me over there. I show up, okay, and Clifton is so fucking obnoxious, and they told him to make it look real. His name was not going to be on a list to get into the place. You have to talk. So Tony's limo shows up. There's a long line of limos. Clifton gives his limo driver $100 to start laying on the horn. Every big star should get the fuck out of the way because Clifton's there. And he starts berating the security guy, and telling him, and he finally gets in there. Hefner comes in and lets him in. And throughout the whole evening, Hefner is walking around with his arm around Tony Clifton, thinking it's Jim. And I'm in the Clifton outfit. I'm sitting there, and I could hear Hefner. When my head's turned the other way, he's going, "It's Jim Carrey. It's Jim Carrey." And we had worked it out that at midnight, the real Jim Carrey was going to show up, and he was not going to make. And we were going to play it like he didn't know who I was. He was not a part of this, and so like around midnight's coming up, and now every one of these Playboy bimbos, I mean, they're just, they got, Hefner's got all these old farts sitting around that place.
Wasn't Tony Curtis there?
Yeah, Tony Curtis. Yeah, he was there with his wife. His wife wanted to fuck Tony, and I think Tony Curtis wanted to join in. Oh no, it was sick. It was so fucking sick, guys. And Clifton's just blatantly asking these girls if they'll go to the grotto and do anal with him. And they all think it's Jim Carrey, so yeah, of course.
Disturbing.
So now it's getting closer to fucking midnight, and I know Jim's going to be there. So I had somebody there with a camera recording all this, Hef allowed us to do because they thought it was Jim Carrey. And I said, get on the phone and tell Jim not to get here. I'm going to get my ass, I'm going to fuck so much in this grotto. So I'm there as Clifton getting blowjobs left and right. This is absolutely true. And then I go back. I'm like so wasted. I came like 3 times, like in an hour and a half. These are the hottest bitches in the world. And Tony's like really just coming in their face, and it's awful.
With the prosthetics still on.
Yeah, of course.
Right,
They think it's Jim Carrey under this. And then Hefner's taking me around and introducing me to everyone. And who walks in but fucking Jim Carrey? Gilbert, it was the greatest double take you've ever seen in your life. Fucking Hefner's got his arm around me as Clifton. He looks at Jim. He looks at me. He looks back at Jim. He looks back at me, and he screams, "Security!" And the next thing I know, there's like 5 goons on me. And they pull me to the ground. Hefner bends over me, and there's people all around. They don't know what the fuck's going on. And Hefner, I'm telling you guys, and I was scared for Hefner because Hefner had a heart attack like a year and a half before, right? This guy had turned so red, his neck, the vein in his neck is, because my face is in the floor, and he says, Hefner says to me, he says, "I don't know who the fuck you are." He said, "But if all these people weren't here, we'd break every bone in your fucking body." And they take me and the girl who was doing on the camera, and they take us out through the back. I thought they were going to kick the shit out of us. And then that security guy, when Tony first came in there, and Tony was calling him an asshole and everything, he's there. So I go, "Oh, this is curtains,
Yeah.
But they let us out. They didn't hurt us. They let us out. And then Jim and Lynn and I, who was working on camera, her and I went back to Jim's house and waited, for him to return. And Jim then said to Hef, he said, "I don't know who these people are," and whatnot.
Kept it going.
Yeah. And then the next day, and listen, because doing Comic Relief, and Hefner has come to Comic Relief, so I knew it wasn't going to be long before Bill Zamey filled him in and said, "Look, this is Bob Zmuda, and I don't want like Hefner to be hating me." So the next morning, because this was a Saturday night, the next Sunday morning I went to Jim's house. I said, "Jim, listen, we got to come clean with Hefner. He's going to find out anyway, and he's going to think we're both assholes for pulling." So we jumped in Jim's car. We went over to his house, and on Sunday afternoons he always shows these movies. He's a big movie buff.
Oh yeah.
So he has these Sunday, these movies at his house. So when we show up, they let Jim in because it's Jim Carrey, and I walk in, and Hef has about 50 people there that just about sit down to watch one of these movies. And while we walk in, we hear Hefner is telling the story of how this Tony Clifton imposter got it, that for years that Hefner prides himself on having the greatest security ever. There's, and that these people, whoever they were brilliant. They were like the Mission Impossible squad.
Now,
and then we walked in and we told them, and Jim said, "You see Bob Zmuda here? He was, and Jim said, Hef, I told you not to tell anybody. You did. So I pulled a prank on you, and everything was great." And he gave us, and we actually have this on video. Everything I just described was on video, me being thrown to the ground and everything else. So anyway,
now,
so that's the Tony Clifton story.
I'm curious, with the Playboy bunnies, did they feel like they had been raped because they were blowing the wrong guy?
Oh, well, this is funny, because when I went in the next day on Sunday, the one that Tony had shot his wad all over her face in the bathroom, when I walked in the next day, she was there. When Bob Zmuda walked in the next day,
she came on Sunday for the screening.
And it looked like she had been scrubbing her face all fucking night to get, my cum off it.
Because she felt it was Jim Carrey's cum.
Yeah,
would have been fine.
Not this. Not
totally,
Bob Zmuda who deloused her.
Yeah, unknown cum, non-stardom cum. You don't want on your face or in your ass.
Celebrity cum.
Totally different.
Totally different. Good for the skin.
Were they screaming rape when they found?
No, they didn't know. They didn't figure this out till the next day.
Oh my God!
The bimbos, they didn't know. It's crazy.
A fucking unknown came in my face.
Pretty much.
Bob, we'll talk a lot more about Man on the Moon, but let's go back to the Improv for a second and talk about how you first met Andy, how he first came into your orbit.
Well, it was around 1973, 74. Like I said, I was a struggling actor in New York, and I knew nothing about, and as Gilbert knows, now there's 20 comedy clubs in every fucking city.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, it was the Improv and Catch, and that was it.
Was Comic Strip around back then?
No.
Okay.
No, that came later.
They were the last, and what's so strange is they're the only ones standing now.
Who is?
Of the three big clubs.
Yeah.
Comic Strip was like the last kid on the block.
Right.
And Improv's gone and Catch is gone.
Yes, yeah. And so it's amazing. But at the time, the Improv, which was the granddaddy, even a little before Catch, before Rick Newman's Sketch. So anyway, this was in Hell's Kitchen, as you know, the worst part of town there. And I walk into this place, and I knew nothing, never been in a comedy club. It was the only comedy club. And I walk in, and it was very interesting, the lineup was going on. I forgot. I think Larry David might have been on the show, Jay Leno. Everybody a fucking unknown. Nobody had two nickels to rub together. And this guy walks in with this suitcase. Thank you very much. And he's talking to Bud Freeman, who was the owner. And at the old Improv, you had to sit in the bar area, and wait till the other room was emptied out, the showroom, and then you went in. So you waited for one crowd to leave, and then they'd clean up the tables. And so Andy was very clever at, he's the master, and we'll get into this. He's the master of the put-on, of the hoax, of the humbug. And so he would come in character, and he would talk to Bud Freeman, and he'd say, I just come off the bus. I want to be stand-up comic. Can you please put me on? And he didn't do it in a very loud, presentational way. And what he was doing is he was kind of conditioning us, the audience, while we were waiting in this room. We thought the guy was real. And Bud would say to him, Bud would kind of hush his voice, but it was a small room, so you would hear all this. And he'd say, he said, what's your name? My name, Andy. He said, well, Andy, you're a very nice man, but I have auditions. It's the third week, Monday of every month. And why don't you, no, please, can I please, I just come. He said, no, I can't do that. You come back in a couple weeks. Well, I'll be happy to, we have audition night. So the show goes on, and you forget about this guy. And then at the end, because nobody would follow Kaufman, the rule was Kaufman would destroy the room, and what he did was so bizarre, and fucked up the audience so much, nobody would follow Kaufman. So Bud would always put him on at the end. And he would say, ladies and gentlemen, Bud said, that's the end of our show. He said, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you were here, a couple hours ago, but a young man walked in off the street, and I never do this, but I don't know what he does, but he seems real nice. And please don't do this. We have auditions every, 3 weeks. But I'm going to put him on tonight. And all I know is I don't know what he does. His name is Mr. Andy. And Kaufman goes up. This is the first time I see him. And Kaufman goes up. And the original act, was that Latka. He called it the foreign man character. Thank you very much. And he's an impressionist. And he's terrible. He's doing I'd like to do the Ronald Reagan. Hello, this is Ronald Reagan. And the voice doesn't change at all.
He did Archie Bunker. And
yeah, he did Archie Bunker. You meathead, get out the knee bed. Right. You think that, it's just terrible. So you're sitting there laughing. But he's so excited because you believe it's the first time this guy's been on stage. And he's so excited that he's getting laughs. And then, so you're laughing more because you go, oh, this bozo, he has this ain't going to go anywhere. It's just bad, but it's so bad you're laughing. And then he realizes that you're not laughing with him, you're laughing at him. And he has a total meltdown on stage, and he starts crying for real. And you feel so bad, which only gets you to laugh more. And now the girls who are on dates are shoving their boyfriends and say, if you don't quit laughing at him, I'm never going to go out with you again. And the place, and a guy, I'll never forget this, because Bud's in the back. Bud had that little control booth there. Not a booth. He had that sound machine there, for the mics and lights. And So I saw a guy get up and go back to Bud because I'm sitting down at the end of the room. He said, Mr. Freeman, he said, you never should have put this guy on stage. This poor guy's going to kill himself. And then, Bud's sitting there, and it was such a heavy psychodrama, and but you had a laugh, and he's crying, and it's awful. And then all of a sudden, he said, I'd like to do one last impression. The Elvis Presley. And you go, oh, my God. And then a strange thing happens. Gilbert, you remember this.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, there's a music cue from 2001, because that's what Elvis would use when he would come out on stage.
Oh, yeah.
And the lights started, the few lights that they had hanging with colored gels in it, they start changing in relationship to this music. You're going, wait a second. What's all this production value all of a sudden? Kaufman turns around, he combs his hair, he puts on an Elvis jacket, he strings a guitar around his neck, and he turns around, and he does, for the next 3 minutes, a drop-fucking-dead Elvis Presley impression. And, and Elvis at the end, he goes, thank you very much. And then after the thank you very much, he goes, thank you very much. And he becomes an idiotic character again. And everybody is scratching their fucking head, standing ovation, you've been had. But I now am out of my fucking mind. I'm going, is this guy this foreign freak who just does this great Elvis impression? Or is the whole thing a put on? So I wait till the place empties out. Half hour later, I'm having a few drinks at the bar, and everybody's leaving. And then Kaufman, I found out he had his dad's car out there, because then he would run over to the fucking Catch a Rising Star and do the same fucking show. So he had all these props, and back then he had congas, he had puppets, he had this 16 millimeter movie projector. I mean the old type. This thing's like 180 pounds. And he's fucking, and he sees me standing out there, and he looks at me, and he could see I want to talk to him, and he's got all these fucking props, and he says to me, can you help me? I have bad back.
Oh, so he's still in character.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think I don't know. What the fuck's going on? So no sooner, for another 20 minutes, I'm loading all this shit into the trunk of his car. My back begins to hurt me. Finally, everything is in there. He comes, he closes the trunk. Andy Kaufman looks at me. This is the first time he, looks at me. He says, thank you very much, sucker. And he gets in the car and pulls away. That was the first time I met Andy Kaufman. And then about 6 months later, we became very fast friends, and then I was his writer for 10 years.
Was he doing the Mighty Mouse bit then?
Oh, yeah.
Back then?
Oh, yeah,
Bob?
That was probably the first thing he did on SNL. That got him the job.
And I saw, slightly off the subject, but I saw an interview with Chris Albrecht, and he's talking about, and I never knew this, that Chris hosted a children's cabaret at the Improv on the weekends that Andy headlined.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He would do the same act for kids?
Well, guys, here's the crazy part, where this all came from. Oh, no, it makes a lot of sense. Andy Kaufman went to a college in Boston called Graham Junior College. It was a shit college that doesn't even exist anymore. It was the only college that he could get into. He had very bad grades, but he wanted to be he wanted to be a child performer. He wanted to have a TV show kind of like Buffalo Bob and Howdy Doody, And so he did when he was a little kid, when he was about 10, 11 years old. He put up signs in Great Neck, children's performer for their birthday parties. And he would come in, and they pay him $10, $15, for a kid's birthday party. He would not let any adults in the room with the kids, just him and the kids. And he would sing Mighty Mouse songs, and Pop Goes the Weasel, and do with puppets and magic. And it was all this childlike stuff. Well, cut later on now, he's in Graham Junior College. Okay, he's 19 years old, 20 years old, and he's in the student union. And Andy was always a skirt chaser. And there's a hot chick who she was supposed to book the show the next night for the student union, and she didn't have any acts. So she's actually running around the cafeteria, asking everybody if there's anything they know how to do that she could put them on stage tomorrow night at the coffee house at the school. And she comes up to Andy, and Andy realizes he's hot, so he wants to talk to her. And she says, no. And she says, oh, really? He says, well, I did a kid's act when I was 11 years old. Remember, he's 20 now. She says, do that. He said, well, no, it's like kid songs. She says, please, I'm in trouble. I got a book. Can you please do it? He says, well, and he wants to lay her, says, okay. And he goes the next night, and he does the same frickin' act he did for these 8, 9-year-olds when he was like 11.
Amazing. And
everybody, and it's the juxtaposition of that childlike material for adults that became the act we know as Andy Kaufman. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
If that girl had never come up to him, Gilbert, you never would have heard of Andy Kaufman ever.
Wow.
And then that's why, so when he auditioned, I have his first audition tape from SNL, the audition tape, because I have a lot of his stuff.
What did he audition with? Because I remember him doing Mighty Mouse the first time.
He did Mighty Mouse, and he did Pop Goes the Weasel.
Right.
It was the idea, once again, of taking this childlike material in front of sophisticated adults, and that's what did it. That was the lightning in the bottle. And then we realized that for a while, when he first started, for a long time, him, his manager, George Shapiro, and myself, we contemplated for a while, should he ever use his real voice? Okay? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Gilbert,
yes.
Should he ever use his real voice, or should it always be, that foreign man voice? And he, and matter of fact, the few first times he did Johnny Carson, he stayed in character, and Johnny loved it because that was like, Johnny loved if you had like a weirdo like Tiny Tim or Chero,
Oh yeah, he was always good with those people.
Yeah, the act worked itself because Johnny they would say something and Johnny just would do those takes to the audience.
Or Carol Wayne.
Anybody
exactly. Who stayed in character like that.
So that was great. But then Andy decided, because he had a whole box of other characters he wanted to do. He wanted to do the bad guy wrestler. He wanted to do Tony Clifton. And basically, he said to himself, he said to me one day, if I keep this character going, I'll never get laid. He says they'll think I'm a goof like Tiny Tim. I'll never get fucking any pussy.
That's funny.
And that was it. So he then did it. Now, what's interesting, when he then went back on Carson and dropped the character and did his own voice, Johnny didn't like it. Johnny was very uncomfortable. The dynamic that he thought he had going with Kaufman didn't work anymore. And from that day on, Andy was never on. They put him on the Tonight Show when somebody else would be hosting, Steve Allen or Steve Martin, but never again with Johnny.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Now, I heard that he started that whole wrestling thing just as basically to get some physical contact with women.
Didn't he like?
It was.
Didn't he like tall, muscular women, Bob?
Yes. You are Gilbert. You've done your homework. This is absolutely true. It started like this. His birthday was coming up. Okay, he was already on SNL. He was, and he was making good money. He was touring the country. And I figured, okay, now I'm his writer. I got to get him something nice. But Andy wasn't really into money and shit. So I figured I got to come up with a clever birthday present. And one day I go over to his house, and all the shades are down low. I see his car in front of the house. So I know he's in there. And I'm knocking on the door, and he's not answering. I don't know what the fuck's going on here. And Andy, I know you're Bob. It's Bob. Bob, let me. What's going on? And so he opens the door. He opens the door a crack, and he's in this fucking sweat. I said, "What's going on?" And I said, "You with somebody?" He said, "No." He says, "Okay, come on in." He shows me. He's got it's dark as hell in the place. He's got. This is before they're like porn videos and stuff, Before the videos, he has this stupid little 8mm little thing that's like it's like attached to a flashlight. It's with a battery, and you turn it on, and there's a little like porno thing going on in it. You put your eye in this thing. This is very early, you know.
I think Gilbert had one.
Gilbert, you have that, don't you?
He has a look of familiarity on his face here. Look of recognition.
Gilbert, so get this. So I'm going, what? He says, well, I don't never show this to anybody, but he says, oh, you got to see this. So I look in this. I know it's some kind of porno. I'm going, what the fuck is this? Is it farm animals? What the fuck, you know? And I look in there, and it's two girls wrestling, but like they got like bikinis on. But he's such a guilty Jewish boy. He's got like chairs piled up that somebody's going to come in and catch him doing this. It was so ridiculous, you know. And I'm going, yeah. He said, isn't that unbelievable? I said, yeah. He's, oh man. And there was one girl named Marilyn Rubin that we knew. She was a beauty. She was an actress, unknown. And there was this other girl. He said, oh, could you imagine those two in bikinis wrestling? You know, and I realized, pop in my brain, I go, this is going to be my birthday present to him. So like a few months later, it's his birthday. His parents are there, his brother and sister at his house. There's about 40 people. And I come out in a referee outfit. And I have this wrestling mat down. He's looking. I said, Andy, I think, what could I get you for your birthday? And I convinced these two girls who knew Andy. They wanted to get him something for his birthday. I said, look, will you girls wrestle in bikinis for him, you know? And that was it. That was the first time we did it. And he got so excited. And the girl, Marilyn, sorry, Marilyn, because people are going to hear this, but that night he fucked Marilyn Rubin. You know, because Andy was very shy, but he figured once you could wrestle a girl, you've broken down the physical distance. You know, now you remember when we were
considered
teenagers.
This.
Remember when you were a teenager, you go to the movie theater, and you know you never, you know, and you put your arm around the girl like for the whole fucking movie. Your arm's aching, you know, and you hope, you know. But so he figured, no, if he could wrestle a girl, he could break that down, and he could then get to third base.
Because he's already groped her.
Yeah.
The entire time.
Exactly.
She's already half naked.
Yeah.
And
so
he's
anyway,
groping her.
This thing takes off, and we decided to start putting this in our road show because we played colleges. You know, we were on the college circuit, so we figured, well, I produced all his shows, and I figured, okay, well, Andy, let's separate the men from the women at the college shows. So when you bought a ticket for an Andy Kaufman show, and you went into the auditorium to see him perform, we had the girls on one side and the boys on the other. You know, and then he would start this whole thing about how he could beat any woman in wrestling. And then I would always come out in the shows. We had about $500. If a girl could pin him, she'd get $500. And it became a big part of the fucking show. You know, the schools would advertise that the girls would show up in leotards. And it was always, and then, you know, we'd have the audience, you know, the girls would come up on stage, and I'd put my hand over their head as to who they would select. So everybody knew this wasn't rigged by the applause in the audience, you know. And they would always we'd always get down to two girls. First of all, of course, the sexiest one, because all the guys will want to see her, you know, get wrestled, you know. And then, of course, the biggest fucking ugliest pig girl on campus that looked like, you know, she's bigger than a guy.
Who
that
looked like she could kill him.
And throw him out of the audience. Well, soon, it wasn't long before Andy started working on Dick Ebersol, on Lorne Michaels, on Dick Ebersol, because Dick at the time was then producing SNL, because that was that little while when Lorne left and then he came back. So Ebersol's director.
Oh yeah, Gilbert knows something about that period.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so he comes on. So Ebersol gets on the show, and Andy finally convinces him to do the wrestling. You know, to do the wrestling. And so now we're on national TV, and SNL had girls, you know, and so the first time he did it on SNL, there was a hot girl that came out of the audience, you know, And now remember, guys, I'm always the referee for these things. So here we are live on SNL, going out to millions of people. And he's wrestling the hell out of this girl. She's hot as all hell. But I'm the only one who's down on the mat, and this is what I hear him saying to the girl. "Oh, baby, you are so hot. We are on national TV right now." He said, "You come back to the dressing room afterwards. We got to get to..." And she's, "You're a pig. Shut up, shut up." You know? And I'm listening to all this shit. But 9 times, and we did this, and the same thing would happen across the college. And we did this. We had probably about 300 wrestling matches, and I am not lying. Andy Kaufman betted about 80% of those girls.
Incredible.
They say, "Oh, we'll just come back and and Zmuda, talk to Zmuda, he'll get you backstage." And first of all, they had the time of their lives. They're being cheered on stage. He has broken down the physical armor between both of them, and it was really incredible. So that's how it started. He would get so aroused. I was scared on SNL that was scared that he would put on a jock strap in the dressing room. This is true before SNL. And then I would take a whole roll of fucking gaffer's tape. And I would wrap it around his dick and balls and tie him down. I swear to you, and that's why then he would put on swimming trunks, these boxer swimming trunks, and remember, then he put on his like these long johns when he wrestled.
Yeah.
Wow. It was so ludicrous, and this was all down because I thought he was going to pitch a tent on national TV.
I prep for every one of these podcasts the same way, Bob, with Gilbert. We keep duct tape handy.
And
Gilbert's wrapped right now, huh?
He is.
And I've just decided to add wrestling to my act.
Wondering what took so long.
Hey, guys, what were you hinting about? Something about SNL or Dick Ebersol? What was that all about?
I was on SNL right after Lorne Michaels.
He was on the Gene Dumanian era.
Yes.
Boy.
Between Lorne and Ebersol.
You saw the politics beneath it all.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't nice.
It wasn't nice, no.
And Dick Ebersol, I remember Dick Ebersol came in. This is so funny. I remember sitting in an office with Eddie Murphy, and it was just some empty office. It wasn't hard.
Yeah.
And somebody goes, "Pick up line 2, Eddie. Someone wants to talk to you." And he goes, "Okay." And he picks up the phone. He goes, Yeah. "Oh, no, I won't tell anyone. No, it's a secret. I won't." And before he even hangs up the phone, he turns to me and goes, "Gene Dumanian's just been fired."
Oh.
and
the EP.
Yes.
And he's not going to tell anyone,
yes.
right?
And then she has a meeting to tell everyone, to announce she's been fired. And by then, everybody knows. And everyone's kind of like looking at the ceiling and at their shoes. And then it's someone's birthday. And they bring out a birthday cake. And they're singing "Happy Birthday."
The timing, right? Yeah.
And then Dick Ebersol comes in a few days later, announces, "I'm the new producer. I'll make some minor changes." And we came back the next day. Each of us are waiting one by one outside his office. I pick up a fan letter from the desk that's addressed to me from some girl in Indiana. And she goes, "Dear Gilbert, I'm so sorry about what happened to you."
The girl in Indiana knew.
Yeah. She knew before I knew I was fired. Yeah.
Incredible.
Well, see what happened. Ebersol was. Oh boy, don't get me started on Dick Ebersol. What happened was this, because Andy was kicked off of SNL, but he was voted off. This was awful. And what happened was this: Kaufman called me one day, and he said that he had gotten. What had happened is that the good thing about Lorne Michaels, Lorne was smart enough to realize Andy was a real artist. Just leave him alone.
Just a performance artist.
I'm not going to. What kind of notes am I going to give this guy other than, Andy, it's too long, or it's too short. Well, it's never going to be too short. It's too long. You need to cut some time out of it. That's all, Lorne would do it. And remember, Lorne was actually a writer. He was a comedy writer for the Smothers Brothers.
Sure. Lily Tomlin.
Lorne's a very smart, sophisticated guy. Ebersol gets in there, and all of a sudden now he's going to start giving notes to Andy. This would be like telling Picasso what colors you should use, It didn't go over well. So they got in a big fucking screaming match, because I wasn't there that day, but I heard from a few people who were there, and they said, oh, no, it was off. It was a big screaming match, Andy and Ebersol, top of their voices, yelling, blah, blah, blah. And then a couple weeks later, I get a call from Andy. He said, hey, listen. He said, here's a bit they want to do on SNL. What do you think about it? I said, well, what is it? He said, well, did you see this Louis the Lobster routine where they had a boiling pot of water and people would call in to vote if Louis the Lobster would live or die? And, of course, the vote, and these were real votes. This is the first time they started doing this, that people could call into a number or two separate numbers for to live or die. And, of course, Louis, they weren't going to kill the lobster, so Louis lived. Well, a couple weeks later, Ebersol has the idea, let's do this with Andy. Let's make Andy Louis the Lobster. Not to boiling water, but so Ebersol comes out and says, ladies and gentlemen, there are some of you who think Andy Kaufman's a genius. There are others of us who believe that he's not funny anymore. But we're going to leave it to you to decide if he is kicked off the air or if he's able to come back. So Andy runs this by me. I said, well, Andy, they're going to kick you off. He said, you think so? I said, of course so. They saved Louis the Lobster. The next guy's going down. Just comedically, that's how it's going to work. He said, oh, okay. He said, I said, so if I was you, I wouldn't do this. Okay, he said, okay, well, let me think about it more. He calls me up a couple days later, said he talked to Ebersol, and that he said, Bob, I'm going to do it. He says, here's why. Because Dick, I said this to Dick, I told him about our conversation, and he said, look, Andy, so they vote you off. That's okay. He says, a couple weeks later, we'll have, while the sketch is going on, you could be in the background like sweeping up the floor or something. I said, well, that's funny. That's a great way to bring you back in, So I said, yeah, well, in that case, if that's what he's going to do, fine. So Andy does the show that he is voted. I mean, they take the vote, and actually it was Eddie Murphy who was the one.
I remember.
Who did this. And the votes come in at the end, and, of course, he's kicked off the show, just like, and the audience at home is like thinking this is a comedy routine anyway, Jesus Christ, 2 weeks before it was Louis the Lobster, How serious is this? Ebersol will not return Kaufman's calls. He is actually kicked off the show. Now, guys, SNL was so powerful, that show at the time was so powerful, all of our dates, our booking dates across the country, dried up because of it.
Wow.
Andy was going to Andy wanted to sue Dick Ebersol, NBC. Oh, it got ugly. It got really fucking ugly. And a matter of fact, and if you believe that Andy Kaufman died, his dad, Stanley Kaufman, Andy's dad, went to the grave saying that it was the stress of what Andy went through because of Dick Ebersol that gave him cancer and killed him.
Wow! And so he never actually returned to SNL,
nope.
did he?
No.
Well, fortunately, Letterman booked Andy at the time.
Well, yeah, because Letterman loved him.
Yeah.
Letterman just loved him. And matter of fact, Andy would go on Letterman and then explain to him what happened. Because Andy would take what really went down in his personal life, what all of us would hide, and he used that stuff as material. So he'd go on Letterman, and he said, nobody will hire me anymore, and this and that, and we put a little Vaseline underneath his nose to make it look like he was crying, and had him grow a beard.
Now, before we forget, let's get to Man on the Moon, the Jim Carrey movie.
Yes.
I heard originally, well, everyone was up for that part.
Everybody. Yeah, what it was, we were surprised. It was crazy. When it was announced, actually, when Danny DeVito announced in the trades that they were moving about Andy Kaufman, all of a sudden, these big stars, it's amazing, Gilbert, how many people wanted to play big stars. Let me give you the names that called in and said, I would like to play the role. It was Tom Hanks, Sean Penn, Nicolas Cage, Gary Oldman, Kevin Spacey. The names went on. Jim Carrey, of course. Ed Norton.
Didn't Milos Forman want Ed Norton for the part?
Yes, he wanted. Milos Forman, who directed the film, and two-time Academy Award winner for Amadeus and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yes, Milos wanted Norton. He had just done The People versus Larry Flint with Norton.
Right.
That Milos directed it, and Scott and Larry, who wrote the screenplay for that, also wrote the screenplay for, as a matter of fact, for Man on the Moon. Actually, they got a movie out now called Big Eyes.
We just interviewed.
We just talked to Scott and Larry a couple of weeks ago.
Great guys, great guys.
And they also wrote Problem Child 1 and 2, so I know them.
That's right, and they did Ed Wood, too.
That's right,
yes.
Right.
These guys, they're, as you know, great guys, great fucking guys. And so, they were kind of, and then, of course, DeVito wanted Jim Carrey because, that Jim was the big box office name, so they figured, the film would open big with Jim, And
I heard Nicolas Cage was really high up in the running.
I wanted Nicolas Cage. There was something about Nicolas, I'm the one. There was something about Nicolas Cage that reminded me of Andy. And not only that, at the time, Cage really had the acting chops because, Man on the Moon is a serious movie. Jesus, he dies at the end. So I figured, well, Jim's funny, but man, this is some heavy lifting here, at least as far as the drama is concerned. Could Jim Carrey pull this off? I was not assured of that at all. So I did not want Jim. And so Milos now, who is a gun-for-hire director, he didn't want to make the decision because if he did, then all these other names like Tom Hanks and Sean Penn, and they would, whoever Milos, they'd go, well, Milos, you didn't want me when I wanted to play Andy Kaufman, so fuck you down the road. So Milos got all upset. He says, Milos has this Czechoslovakian accent. He says, this is what we do. So he says, let's put in the trades. Whoever wants to play Andy Kaufman must make audition tape. Because this way, a lot of these big guys, they ain't going to make audition tape.
Yeah.
Then the pressure would be off them. Well, I'm going, that's a good idea, because I know that, And then I get the call I dreaded most. I get a call from Jim Carrey. Now, Jim had done Comic Relief, so I knew Jim, but I didn't know him well. And now he's the $20 million guy, and he calls me. And remember, I want Cage. I've been talking to Nicolas Cage over the phone for like months, saying, Nick, you got the fucking role. You're the guy. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not the studio, but as far as I'm concerned, you're the guy. So Jim calls me. And he says, Bob, how are you? Good. And he said, I really want to play this role. And I made the audition tape. And Jim's so smart, guys. He says, before I embarrass myself with Milos Forman, can you come over to the house and see it, Bob? And I said, sure, and I really didn't want to see it. And I said, when? He says, could you come now? Yeah, sure, Jim. And so I'm driving to his house in Bel Air, and I'm going. And I'm saying to myself, now, Bob, whatever he shows you, don't say anything he could take to the bank. Don't say, that's great. Say, hey, that's interesting. Don't insult him, So I go over to his house, and, of course, the gates open up. He's in Bel Air, incredible fucking home. And, and the property is so magnificent that he actually has a movie theater on the property in its own fucking building. Okay, I walk in there, and he's got in this theater, he's got mounted on the walls behind plexiglass all the costumes from all his movies: The Riddler, cable guy, they're all there lined up. And he has brought in a projectionist just for me, and he's going to show me this audition tape he made.
Didn't he make it with Judd Apatow?
Yes. Yeah. Judd, yeah. So anyway, what he and Judd wasn't that well known at the time, but that was his good friend. And he brought in a candy counter guy. So he's got a full candy counter back there and everything. And he comes and he takes me back in there, and he says, and he says, Bob, he says, give me about 10. He says, I got about 10 minutes of phone calls to make, and then I'll bring on the audition tape. But help yourself to anything you want, any popcorn, ice cream. So I'm sitting in there and I'm jamming this shit in my pockets because I figure I'll never see Jim Carrey again. I want Nicolas Cage, So I'm taking the popcorn and everything, and meanwhile, while I'm sitting there, before he comes back with the audition tape, on the big screen in the theater, he's got old clips from Taxi, from Saturday Night Live, and it's great. And I'm sitting there, and I'm watching the real Andy Kaufman, and then about 10 minutes later, just like you said, he shows up. And the candy counter person's gone, and he shows up, and he's got this little brown bag. And I'm alone with him in this dark little theater. And he says, okay, Bob. He says, well, here's my audition tape. And he reaches in the bag, and he starts laughing like a fucking maniac. And there's nothing in the bag. And he tears the bag up, and I have no fucking clue what's going on. I'm thinking maybe he's a fucking nut, Who's to say a big celebrity can't be a serial killer, He's like a fucking nut. And then he says, so what do you think of my audition tape? And he points, guys, to the big screen. And what he had done, you're right, he had gotten hold of his buddy, Judd Apatow. They contacted Lorne Michaels. They got the drop curtain from SNL to be put on a truck and shipped to L.A. They set this up in a studio, and Judd shot it, and they flawlessly cut in Andy doing the Mighty Mouse routine and playing the congas with Jim Carrey back and forth. It was flawless. It was beyond fucking belief. And I, of course, and I got quite emotional. Remember, I want fucking Nicolas Cage. I am so taken back. He had nailed it. This just shows you how these motherfuckers work it. A guy, why he's the $20 million guy. Here he is auditioning for the role. I would find out later, he took a month. He took 4 days every week for 1 month to learn how to play the congas just so he could make this fucking audition tape.
Now, I heard later on they asked Nicolas Cage if he ever sent in a tape.
Well, here, let me tell you, because there's a punch coming up.
Yeah.
So now I stop answering my phone from Nicolas Cage.
He would have been great. He would have been great in the part, Bob.
I got this girlfriend. She goes, God, it's Nick Cage calling it. Don't tell him I'm not here. Tell him I'm not here, Because I now want Carrey. I'm totally sold on Carrey because I'm going, look, he's got the impression down. Let's start the movie with that at least, So he was so fucking good. So anyway, we go to the premiere and everything, and after the premiere, we had at Man's Chinese. They had the party afterwards. I forgot where you had the party. Anyway, so we had a big party afterwards. So I'm at the bar drinking, slugging a few drinks down. There's a tap on my shoulder. I turn around, and it's Nicolas Cage. I go, and I go, I'm stumbling on. He said, no, Bob. He said, no. He was really cool. He said, no. Because remember, he had just seen the film too. And he says, I got to tell you, he says, good choice on your guy's part. He says, I couldn't have done what Jim did. And it's not like Cage was hurting for work anyway. You know what I mean? And he said no. So we started tossing back. He's a big elky, Cage. So we started drinking. And then, here's the punch. And then I tell him, I finally turn, it was like 10 minutes later and everything's fine, so we're goombas again. I say to him, I said, Nick, I got to ask you, why isn't it didn't make the audition tape. Like, I blamed it like he didn't make the audition tape, you know?
Yeah.
And he breaks into the biggest laugh. And I did not know that he was, like, really good friends with Jim Carrey, right? He said, oh, yeah, the audition tape. I'll tell you why I didn't make that audition tape. Because Jim Carrey called me and said, guys in our position shouldn't make audition tape.
That's funny.
There you go.
So Nicolas Cage was okay about the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, he was fine about it. Yeah. No, he was serious. He said, I couldn't have done that impression. That was spot on.
And I got to tell you something.
Yeah.
I did a job in Reno recently, and I went up to the Bunny Ranch, the big brothel.
I know this because Dennis Hoff's a friend of mine.
Oh yeah, and I'm the only I'm the only person in the history of the Bunny Ranch not to get pussy while I was out there.
I know that. I was shocked. I asked Dennis.
Are you doing research?
I said, what do you mean? He didn't get laid? He said, nope. He was, you know.
Well, if he would have given me a coupon, maybe, and said, here's for a
Jew,
yeah, here's for a free blowjob, then maybe.
You don't like the prices.
So did you actually go to the facility and everything?
Yeah. It was some like tie-in press thing between the club and the Bunny Ranch.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They told me that you and Andy practically had your own bungalow there.
Pretty much
Yeah.
so. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much so. No, Andy would do a thing. This was so crazy. Is the first time, you know, when he played Harrah's in Reno, and he had heard about these brothels, so we went into the Bunny Ranch. Then it wasn't called the Bunny Ranch at the time. Dennis added the bunny to it. But anyway. So when we walked into this brothel for the first time, they had about 26 girls line up, you know, and it was like, wow. And Andy's eyes were just about bugging out of his head, and he said he didn't want to insult any of the girls by not taking them, so he was going to take them all. Now, we were playing Harrah's, like I said, in Reno for like the whole week. So he had made a deal that he was going to fuck everyone before he left town, these 26 girls, in about 5 days. And right when he'd get off stage, there'd be a limo waiting for him.
God bless him.
He'd jump and he'd go over to the fucking Bunny Ranch there and start nailing these girls. So he'd go in there like 3-4 girls a night.
So it wasn't exactly the sad, tragic life of Andy Kaufman that most
God,
people...
No. Oh, no.
That wasn't in the movie.
No. And, you know, he was probably the first celebrity that publicly came out in support of legalized prostitution. you know, because he was kind of a wallflower and everything. He was kind of shy. And actually his mom, Janice, who I was very good friends with, she was so happy that he was going to the brothel because she thought he was kind of a weird kid. And, you know, and she would say, oh, you know, call and say, well, where's Andy? Oh, he's off at camp. She'd call it camp.
He was relieved.
Oh, he had hookers. I talk about it in the book. He had hookers left and right being flown in and everything else.
Now, here's something I want to know.
Yeah.
Danny DeVito was in the movie Man on the Moon.
Playing George Shapiro,
right,
manager.
Right.
But then they go to the set of Taxi, and it's got the whole cast, and you're sitting there the whole time going, wasn't Danny DeVito on Taxi?
Gilbert wants to know why Danny didn't do double duty, Bob.
Oh, you picked that up, did you?
Yes.
Sharp.
Yeah, we were wondering ourselves
It
on
was
the set.
kind of like if you visited the set of The Odd Couple, and there's no Jack Klugman there.
Well, Danza wasn't there either.
Yeah. Well, listen, they thought about it, and they just decided, no, that would be, that if they put him in there, and then he's playing George with a mustache, that might fuck things up more.
It might bend a few people's minds.
Yeah, but a lot of people didn't mind it. You know, not very few people bring it up. You're one of them, because obviously you're a stickler for details. You know?
Who's that? Now, you were played in the movie by Paul Giamatti, Bob. But
Paul Giamatti played me. I cast Paul Giamatti to play me.
Uh-huh.
Universal wanted to keep me happy, So they had different actors audition to play. What was his name? Committed suicide. Seymour Hoffman.
Oh, Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah, he made an audition tape. He played me. You know.
And wasn't Garth Brooks considered for the part of Bob Zmuda?
Well, I get this bizarre call at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night from Milos Forman, who I think was stoned or something. And he calls me in the middle of the night and says, Zmuda, I know who can play you. I go, Milos, it's 3 a.m. What are you talking about? For the movie, who we could cast to play you. I said, who? Garth Brooks. He go, Garth Brooks? I said, Milos, Garth Brooks is a country. What? He's not even an actor. What are you talking about? And he says, no, he was on SN. He hosted SNL tonight. He killed. He's good. Well, of course, I got the tape, and really, I mean, Garth was great. He held his own with the cast. You know, he was funny and everything else. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, maybe this might work. Shit, you know. And so now this is where it gets funny. So I said, yeah. So we actually, I called up William Morris because I thought, you know, because then the studio was going, I don't know about Garth Brooks. And I figured, well, I'll get, you know, William Morris behind this maybe. So I called his agents up and I told them about the conversation I had with Milos. The next thing I know is that Garth cancels a Friday night performance, sold-out performance, to fly to L.A. to meet Milos at the Polo Lounge, and he walks in as Tony Clifton, Garth Brooks.
Oh,
because
never heard that.
If you're going to play Bob Zmuda in Man on the Moon, you play Bob Zmuda and you play Tony Clifton because Andy handed the role, you know, to me, and you know. So he had to get that down. So he wanted to impress Milos. He got an outfit. He got a wig. He got, you know, he did the sunglasses, the mustache. He shows up at the Polo Lounge as Tony Clifton and has dinner with Milos. Now, here's what's funny. For some reason, William Moore, and I'm glad that Paul Giamatti got the role.
Giamatti's wonderful.
Yeah, better than Garth Brooks, I think, would have been. So, but William Morris didn't want Garth Brooks to do it, so he didn't do it. But here's what's funny. About a year later, this is how great these major celebrities are and the way, you know, their business minds thinks. And I'm reading the article in Rolling Stone that Garth Brooks has a new album out. And you'll remember this, Gilbert. You'll remember this. He did an alter ego.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Chris Gaines.
And he had a little goatee. It was called Chris something. He had a little, it was not good. It got
Chris
bad
Gaines.
reviews. He had like a little goatee.
Yeah.
He had his hair different.
Yeah.
But here's what's so funny is that the article, the writer who wrote this review of this album and didn't like it, started it by saying, it looks like Garth Brooks has taken a page out of the Andy Kaufman alter ego Tony Clifton book.
How bizarre.
Isn't that funny? And the guy never knew what about the story. So here, Garth figured, hey, this alter ego shit, you know, I put time into it. Let's do it. Small world, huh?
Now, I remember when Andy Kaufman died, I was one of those that thought, oh, is this another hoax? Now,
you and 85% of the country.
Yeah. Now, you believe he may have faked his own death.
I know he faked his death.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what my book, I know he faked his death because I helped him do it. It took about 3 years. And he had gotten this idea that this would be the greatest put-on of all times, and he toyed with it. And he kept toying with this and how to do it. He would call me up. We talked about this for 2.5, 3 years of how to fake his death. He'd call me up and he'd say, Zmuda, he'd call me up in the middle of the night. He said, how do I get my hands on a cadaver? And I said, oh, geez. I said, Andy, you medical schools, you could get your hands on a cadaver, but there's going to be paperwork. He said, oh, I see. I said, so he said, well, that's not good. I said, why did you want a cadaver? He said he thought he'd fake a car accident, fiery crash, have a body in there. And I said, and it'd be Andy Kaufman. And I said, Andy, they're going to, they're going to check, dental records. He said, well, he actually said, can I knock out a couple of my teeth? and throw it in. I said, no. I said, there's going to be records of your top, of the whole Jaws, And so he toyed with this for a while, and he finally came up with the idea that he would find somebody. He really realized to pull this off, because at the time, as you know, everybody was waiting for him to fake something. Nobody was going to believe. He was the boy who had cried wolf too many times. He had totally bamboozled the American public, that he had almost broken his neck when he wrestled the man Jerry Lawler in Memphis. That was all bullshit. He had convinced people. Gilbert, I did Tony Clifton for 8 years. I would go on Letterman. I would go on Merv. I would do all the Miss Piggy special.
Dinah Shore.
I would go on, and they thought it was Andy Kaufman under the prosthetics. I kept this quiet. I kept this quiet until we did the movie Man on the Moon, and then Scott and Larry put it in the script. I didn't even want him to. I would have gone to my grave. I did Letterman 3 times with Tony Clifton. The last time, David turned to me during the commercial break and said, "Andy, if I didn't know it was you, I'd swear it was somebody else." And this is Letterman, who likes to think he's the coolest, brightest guy in the room. Totally bamboozled. Andy would be at home laughing his ass off. So truly amazing stuff. I was talking about something. I think I forgot what it was.
You were talking about how he finally came up with the right way to pull it off, which according to the book.
Oh, yeah. So what he did
fake X-rays and a body double.
What he did. No, he figured the way to do it was to find somebody who was dying of cancer that was a fan of his, that was a diehard fan of his, and said, "Look, I want to pull off, and with your help, pull off the ultimate hoax." He got a real guy who was dying of cancer, his same height, same color eyes, but everything else, because of prosthetics that were used on this individual, everything else could be changed, just like me. I did, like I said, for years, I played Tony Clifton. Everybody thought it was Andy Kaufman. So he went in, he got a makeup expert to do the same thing, and then this is the guy that went to Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and everybody believed it was Andy Kaufman.
Wow.
And I talk in detail on how that in the book, as you know, of how that was pulled off. Now, so anyway, this is why I came out with this book now, is because Andy, when we had asked Andy, well, how long would he go in hiding for to pull this off? Lynn Margulies, Courtney Love played in the movie, Lynn said to Andy, and she said, how long would you be gone for if you pulled the scam off? A year or two? And he laughed. He said, a year or two? He said, if I was a little boy about it, it'd be a year or two. If I was a man about it, it would be 30 years. Guys, supposedly he died in 1984. Here we are, just 2014. We're at the 30-year mark. And that's the reason I wrote the book. Only because he gave it that time limit is the reason I came out, and I'm now for the first time announcing, yes, he did fake his death. I want him back. Now, he may be dead. Let me get this straight, Gilbert, okay? I have not talked to Andy Kaufman. I have not talked to Andy Kaufman in 30 years. And for all I know, he got hit by a bus last week. I don't know. But I will tell you this, guys. 30 years ago, he faked his death.
So he's due. It's been 30 years.
He's due.
And
yeah.
How old would he be now if he's
64.
64.
And didn't he threaten Bob to come back as a children's clown named Zany Clowney?
Well, I asked him what he said. I asked him, well, Andy, aren't you going to miss performing and stuff? And he said, oh, I'm going to keep performing. I said, well, how are you going to do that? You remember, he wanted to come back. He said, he wanted to go back to his original. He never really wanted to be a big celebrity Hollywood guy. The plan really was, and he thought, and he hated that when he had to go through all the stuff. Gilbert, you know the backstabbing and everything. You know how nasty this business can become. And what he went through at Eversole and SNL, and then he was, then they canceled Taxi. He was kicked out of the TM movement.
Oh, yeah, by the women.
Because he was wrestling women.
Oh, and
so, yeah.
Could I just ask you quickly?
Sure.
You had an Old Star seance.
Yes.
To get in touch with Andy. Who was there?
We had a star seance over at the that top room in the Comedy Store. What's that called?
Oh, the belly room?
Up in the belly room, because Andy loved the Comedy Store, on one of the anniversaries, May 16th, of his death. And who was there was, I think it was Bobcat Goldthwait. I think it was...
Was Saget there?
Bob Saget, yes, was there. I think Andy Dick was there and a few other people, I brought in a real legit top seance person, and said they made contact with some other spirit that was hanging around, some waitress.
I like the term a legit seance woman. Yeah.
So
there's some people who believe in this stuff.
It's like a totally honest con man I found.
So Andy did not come through, Bob.
He did not come through, which is further proof that he's still alive.
I love it. I love it. Now, this is strange. Gilbert's phone is ringing.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Hello.
Well, shut the phone off. We're supposed to be doing this.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. This is. Yeah. This guy called. This is the third time this guy's called. What? He says you're full of shit, and he wants to know if he could tell you on the air. I don't know if you want me to just hang up on him.
Yeah, go on. Put him on. I don't give a shit.
You want to put him on?
I guess if it's okay with you, because he sounds like an asshole.
Okay, we'll put him on.
Okay, hang on a second, Bob.
Right.
Dara and I'll set this up. Go. Put the phone by the mic. Go ahead.
Are you guys setting me up?
You're talking to him.
No.
Hello? Hi. Wait, hello? Who's that? Tony Clifton. Who do you think it is, asshole? Gilbert.
We're sorry. We're sorry about this, Bob. But
I'll tell you one thing. No, I'll talk to him. I'll talk to him.
You want to talk to him?
I'll talk to him. Damn right, I'll talk to you, fucking Zmuda. I read your book and never read such bullshit in my life.
Tony, but treat our guest with a little bit more respect than that.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, Tony. I'm still there. I'm listening. Listen, you are a dumb fucking Pollock. Let me tell you that much. Okay? First of all, I agree with Elaine Boozler, who has come out publicly and saying that you are nothing more than a low-life fucking maggot feeding off the fucking dead body of your friend. Now, what kind of friend are you that you will write this book about him?
Wow.
Hey, listen, Tony. Is he on?
He's still there.
I am on. Just fucking talk, asshole. Well, if you just calm down, I'll talk a little, okay? If you give me a chance, I will give you a chance. Go on, speak your piece. Because I think you're the biggest piece of shit to do this. You and the Flynn Margulies. I think you went all the way to the bank, making money, coming up with these fucking phony fucking stories, and I think this goof Jew boy Gilbert here, on top of it, was putting you on the air, helping you sell books and line your pocket over your dead buddy.
Wow.
Hey, Gilbert?
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised you would do this to me. No, he got nothing to do with it. He's a dumb fucking Jew himself.
Look,
that's how it is. So, anyways, what I think you're full of shit. I don't think anybody should buy this fucking book. And I'm just telling you. Now, I think Coffin, that guy is as dead as a doornail, and I don't think he was a cocksucker. And I opened for him a few times, and he never tried to pinch my ass or anything backstage. And as you know, a few years ago when he was still alive, I was quite a handsome dude.
Wow.
Well, Tony, I don't know what to say. Hey, Gilbert,
this is awkward.
Okay, well, and...
I don't know. I mean, I didn't know if he
And I'll tell you another thing about this one. He's a dumb fucking Pollock. That reminds me, you hear about the Pollock whose wife had triplets?
No.
He went out looking for the two other guys. Hey,
wow.
Polish parachute opens on impact.
Bob, we have to apologize. We figured you guys were. We figured you guys.
Wait, I got another Polish dump. Don't let that dump go up. Ever hear about a Polish firing squad? They stand in a circle. Stupid Polak. He won a gold medal in the fucking Olympics. He had it bronzed. Okay, Tony. Listen, Jesus. Okay, Tony. Hey, maybe we had enough of them, Gil. It's up to you. Don't get me off the fucking line. Hey, hear about the Polish lesbian? Yeah, she liked men. Jesus, Tony. Okay, well, that's all I want to say.
Okay, well, Tony, thanks for calling in.
And don't buy that fucking scoundrel's book. He's a scoundrel. Elaine Boozler's right. He's a maggot living off the dead bones of his friend. Tony, that makes no sense because I believe Andy Kaufman's still alive. Yeah, well, I think you're an asshole.
So you, Tony, you think that Bob is some kind of a ghoul or something?
He's a fucking dumb Polak trying to make a few bucks for him fucking self. That's what it's all about. Hey, what did the Polish girl do after she sucked cock?
What?
She spit out the feathers.
All right, Tony. Well, thanks for calling in. We appreciate it, hearing from you.
Hey, wait, why you guys got to get off the... Hello?
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
Is he gone?
We cut him off.
We
cut him
yeah,
off.
Yeah.
He was a little over the top.
Boy, Gilbert, thanks a lot.
What? I gave you the option.
Well, you didn't say it was Tony Clifton going to be on.
Yeah, he's
so
cold.
Okay, I forgive you guys, but wow.
We figured you guys had a background. You'd worked together.
What a maniac, because and that's the real Tony Clifton. He tried to show up to the set of Man on the Moon, and of course Universal banned him from the lot and the whole thing. He's a nut.
Which brings me to a question to start to wrap this up, Bob. I understand there's a script floating around, the Tony Clifton story. What happened?
Yes.
What happened to that project?
Well, Universal owns it. Actually, Andy and I started writing that back in '81. Now, here's what's interesting. Here's a little piece of fact that if people want to figure out that Andy Kaufman, to prove that Andy Kaufman did fake his death and had thought about it 3 years before. We had a bungalow on the back lot at Universal. Kaufman shows up one day. He had been up all night. He's got some papers, and he says, we got to change the Tony Clifton script. I said, what? Why? He said, look, read this. And he gave me this page, and in it, he wanted in the movie is the Tony Clifton story about Tony Clifton, and in the movie he wants Tony to die at Cedars-Sinai Hospital of cancer. Guys, Andy Kaufman would die of cancer, supposedly, at Cedars-Sinai Hospital 4 years later. That is a fact. That's in the script. It's in the vault at Universal Studios. We had a guy from UCLA in the statistics department do odds. The chance of you naming what you would die of and what hospital is something like 840,000 to 1. An impossibility.
Now, briefly, before we wrap up, what were the memories of the taxi crew about Andy? Were they still kind of like pissed off?
Well, this is a good question to wrap up on, because this is one of the most bizarre things, and I talk about it extensively in the book, is Danny DeVito, as you know, was a member of the cast, and Danny was the one who got this movie made at Universal. And he's the guy. He had the clout because he had done. Danny's a big movie producer.
Yes.
American public doesn't even know this. He did Pulp Fiction. That was Danny DeVito.
Yeah. Jersey Films.
Yeah. And big movies. And so he got this movie made, and they do what they call a electronic press kit for a film, where you sit people down and when they're making the movie for publicity. And Lynn was the one, because Lynn was a filmmaker herself, so they threw Lynn a few coins to do the EPK, as they call it, for Man on the Moon. She came in one day to my office on the set and said, "You ain't going to believe it. I just interviewed Danny DeVito." I said, "Yeah." And Danny was talking about Andy's funeral in Great Neck and how he was there. And I went, "Wait a second." I said, "Danny DeVito wasn't there. Either was any of the cast members of Taxi." She says, "I know. But Danny's lying on this EPK that he was there." And then it hit me. This is the reason Danny DeVito made this movie, to rewrite history. If you see the movie Man on the Moon, you will see that in the funeral scene in Great Neck, not only is Danny there, but the entire cast of Taxi. And in real life, it never happened. Not only this, the day we shot that scene, and we shot most of this movie, on the Universal lot, about 95% of it. But for some reason, on that day to shoot this, we went out, I think, to Pasadena, to some cemetery that had a chapel. The whole cast went, the whole crew, about 300 extras. And I'm going, why the fuck are they spending this kind of money? We could do this on the back lot. Danny DeVito wanted to recreate and rewrite history and shoot the whole scene at this cemetery in this chapel and rewrite history, because I think he was so fucking guilty that he and the cast did not show up to Andy Kaufman's funeral. Guys, it gets weirder. They spent $35,000. Remember, I'm a co-executive producer on this movie, so I see all the invoices. They spent $35,000 with a guy making a wax reconstruction of Andy Kaufman in the casket, to look like Jim Carrey. They could have had Jim lay in there and get the shot. They didn't want it. After shooting had stopped, it was the most bizarre fucking moment of my life. I'm there with the cast and with the cast members, the original cast members of Taxi, in this chapel. Danny said a few words, and he went up to the casket where this $35,000 wax figure of Andy Kaufman was in it, and he said a few words. This was not on camera, and he closed it, and they wept. And I'm telling you, this was the psychological imperative of why Danny DeVito made that movie.
Fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, true.
So anyway,
yes.
To wrap up, I'm Gilbert Gottfried. This has been Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal podcast with my co-host Frank Santopadre, and we have been talking to Bob Zmuda.
We want to wrap before Tony calls back. Bob.
Yes. Whose new book is Andy Kaufman, The Truth Finally.
And Andy, if you're out there,
Yeah.
Send us a sign.
Or at least buy a copy of the book.
Thank you.
Bob, this was informative, fascinating. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks so much, guys. Really
Thank you, Bob.
We appreciate
it. Gilbert, if you're up in Reno anytime, contact. I live up in South Lake Tahoe.
Oh, yeah?
We'll go to the ranch together.
You got a coupon for him?
Huh?
You got a coupon for him?
I got a coupon for him.
Okay, I'll be there.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Some major office supply stores are closing their doors, but Walmart has low prices on supplies you need to keep your business running smoothly. Like 2 packs of Papermate Clearpoint mechanical pencils on rollback for $4.77, 400-count Post-it Notes cube on rollback for $3.97, and 25-yard Scotch heavy-duty packaging tape dispenser for just $2.88. Plus, Walmart's got great prices on things like copy paper, printers, and more. For all your office supply needs, save money, live better. Walmart.